An old man was traveling through the desert with his donkey when he reached a drought-stricken village. The villagers welcomed him warmly, offering him food and care for his donkey. During dinner, he was surprised to be served camel milk, known for its unpleasant taste. Curious, he asked about it. The villagers explained that an endless drought had left them with barely any water. Every drop they had was used sparingly for crops. "I am one of the wise," the old man declared. "I can bring you rain. But first you must bring me a large bucket of water. I need some to summon more." The villagers, desperate for relief, spread the word. By morning they had pooled the last of their water reserves, just enough to fill a bucket, and handed it over to the old man. He took the bucket into his host's house, removed his dusty clothes, and began washing them. A curious child peered through the window and saw what he was doing. Shocked, the child ran to alert the villagers. Angry and shouting, the villagers rushed to confront the man, but by the time they arrived, he was calmly hanging his clothes to dry. "Shame on you," roared the chief. "How dare you waste our water while our children go thirsty?" Before the old man could respond, the sky darkened and rain began to pour. It rained for 5 days straight, filling every reservoir and soaking the parched earth. The villagers rejoiced, treating the old man as a hero. The chief apologized profusely for doubting him. As the old man prepared to leave, the curious child finally gathered the courage to ask, "How did you make it rain?" The old man chuckled and said, "It's simple. This always happens when I hang my clothes to dry." A government official visits a pig farmer and asks, "What do you feed your pigs?" The farmer replies, "Oh, I just give them whatever scraps I have lying around." The official is outraged. "That's animal cruelty. I'm fining you $10,000. The next day, another official shows up and asks the same question. The farmer says, "Oh, only the best for my pigs. Caviar, fine cheeses, and hand-picked salads." This official is equally horrified. "That's way too rich for them. They'll get sick. I'm fining you $10,000. On the third day, yet another official arrives and asks, "What do you feed your pigs?" The farmer smiles and says, "I just give them $20 each and let them decide for themselves." A big city lawyer was hired by a railroad to defend against a lawsuit from an old rancher. The rancher claimed the train had hit his prize bull, which was missing, and he only wanted fair compensation. The case was set to be heard by the justice of the peace in the back room of the general store. Before the hearing, the lawyer cornered the rancher, trying to negotiate a settlement. After some convincing, the rancher agreed to accept half of what he was asking and signed the paperwork. As the rancher pocketed the check, the lawyer couldn't resist bragging. "You know, old man, I hate to admit it, but I totally bluffed you. I didn't have a case at all. The train crew was asleep or out of position that morning, and I had no witnesses to back me up. I couldn't have won in court." The rancher smiled and replied, "Well, I'll tell you something, young feller. I was a bit worried about winning that case myself. You see, that bull came home this morning." Bubba and Billy Bob, not exactly known as the sharpest tools in the shed, decided to join the weekly charity raffle at the Little Rock Walmart. They each bought 5 tickets for $1 apiece. The following week, the winners were announced. Billy Bob snagged first prize, a year's supply of gourmet spaghetti sauce and extra-long spaghetti. Bubba landed 6th prize, a toilet brush. A week later, the two ran into each other at Walmart. "How's your prize working out for you?" Bubba asked. Billy Bob grinned. "It's great. I love spaghetti." "What about you?" Billy Bob asked. "How's that fancy toilet brush?" Bubba shook his head. "Not so good. I reckon I'm going to switch back to paper." 3 receptionists were chatting at a convention, sharing stories about how dodgy their co-workers were. The first said, "Nobody's dodgier than car salesmen. My colleagues will patch up a car just enough to make it off the lot before it breaks down, then swear it was in perfect condition. The second chimed in, "That's nothing. I work at a law office. My colleagues will defend your coworkers in court and make sure the lemon sale looks like the buyer's fault. Lawyers are the dodgiest." The third receptionist sighed. "Wow, that hits close to home. I bought a car recently that broke down just after I drove it to work. When I took the dealership to court, their lawyer argued so well they weren't found at fault." "So, who's Dodgier?" asked the first. "My colleagues," the third replied. "I work for the police department. While I was stuck in my broken-down car in the station parking lot, one of my co-workers backed into me, then arrested me for reckless driving." A young banker decided it was time for his first tailor-made suit. He went to the finest tailor in town and got measured. A week later, he returned for his first fitting. The suit was perfect, sharp, stylish, and exactly what he needed to exude confidence in business. As he admired himself in the mirror, he instinctively reached down to put his hands in his pockets, only to realize there weren't any. Confused, he turned to the tailor. "Excuse me, but there are no pockets in this suit." The tailor raised an eyebrow. "Didn't you say you were a banker?" "Yes, I did," the young man replied. "Well, that explains it," said the tailor with a smirk. "Who's ever heard of a banker with his hands in his own pockets?" "At my first job, I worked in an orange juice factory, but I got canned. I just couldn't concentrate. Then I tried being a lumberjack in the woods, but I couldn't hack it, so they gave me the axe. Next, I thought tailoring might be a good fit, but it turned out to be a so-so job. I moved on to Starbucks, but I had to quit because I got tired of the same old grind. Thinking I'd spice up my life, I tried being a chef, but I just didn't have the time. I worked at a deli for a while, but any way I sliced it, I couldn't cut the mustard. Being a musician sounded fun, but I realized I wasn't very noteworthy. Then I studied hard to become a doctor, but I didn't have the patience for it. Next, I gave the shoe factory a shot, but I just didn't fit in. As a fisherman, I discovered I couldn't live on my net income. Then I got a job at a pool maintenance company, but the work was too draining. I even tried working at a gym, but they told me I wasn't fit for the job. Eventually, I became a historian, but there was no future in it. My final attempt was at a muffler factory, but it was too exhausting. After all those tries, I decided to retire, and guess what? I'm perfect for the job. A destitute man was wandering the streets, desperately searching for work. Eventually, he stumbled upon a brothel with a "Help Wanted" sign in the window. He stepped inside and asked the manager about the job. The manager said, "We need a bookkeeper, but first, can you read?" "No," the man replied. "Can you write?" "No." "Can you at least add and subtract?" "Not really," said the man. "But I'm desperate. I haven't eaten in days." The manager sighed and handed him a quarter. "Here, buy yourself something to eat." The man took the coin and left. As luck would have it, he came across a vendor selling apples for 25 cents each. He bought one, and just as he was about to eat it, another man approached him and said, "I'll give you 50 cents for that apple." Seeing an opportunity, the man agreed and sold the apple. With his profit, he bought 2 more apples and sold them for twice the price. He repeated this process, gradually building his business. Years later, he became the owner of the largest fruit shipping company in the United States, worth millions. A reporter caught wind of his rags to riches story and decided to write a feature on him. Before publishing, the reporter needed the man's signature for approval. The man said, "I can't do that." "Why not?" asked the reporter. "I can't read or write," the man admitted. Shocked, the reporter exclaimed, "You're a millionaire and you can't read or write. Imagine where you'd be if you could." The man chuckled and replied, "I'd probably be a bookkeeper in a brothel." A young man from Nebraska moved to Florida and applied for a job at a massive everything-under-one-roof department store. During the interview, the manager asked, "Do you have any sales experience?" The young man replied, "Yes, sir. Back in Omaha, I was one of the best Bible salesmen around." Impressed by his confidence, the manager hired him on the spot. "You start tomorrow. After we close, I'll check in to see how you did." The first day was tough, but the young man made it through. After the store closed, the manager came to find him. "So," the manager asked, "how many customers did you make sales to today?" The young man replied, "One." "Just one?" the manager exclaimed. "Most of our salespeople sell to 20 to 30 customers a day. How much was the sale for?" $101,237.65, the young man said. The manager's jaw dropped. $101,237.65? What on earth did you sell him? The young man explained, "Well, first I sold him a small fish hook, then a medium fish hook, and then a larger one. After that, I sold him a new fishing rod. When I asked where he planned to fish, he mentioned heading to the coast, so I took him to the boat department and sold him a twin-engine Boston whaler. Then he said his car couldn't tow the boat, so I walked him over to the automobile department and sold him a 4x4 truck with all the upgrades." The manager was stunned. "So let me get this straight. You're telling me a guy came in to buy a fish hook and you ended up selling him a boat and a truck?" The young man shook his head. "No, sir. He came in to buy tampons for his wife, and I said, 'Friend, your weekend's shot. You might as well go fishing.'" An out-of-work mime visits the zoo one day and, hoping to make some money, decides to perform on the street. However, as soon as he begins to gather a crowd, the zookeeper grabs him and drags him into his office. The zookeeper explains that the zoo's most popular attraction, a gorilla, has suddenly died, and he fears attendance will drop. Desperate, he offers the mime a job dressing up as the gorilla until they can get a replacement. The mime agrees. The next morning, he puts on the gorilla suit and enters the cage. To his surprise, he loves the job. He can sleep whenever he wants, play around, and draw bigger crowds than he ever did as a mime. However, as time goes on, the mime grows bored of just swinging from tires. He notices the crowd is paying more attention to the lion next door. Not willing to lose the attention, he climbs to the top of his cage, crawls across the partition, and dangles over the lion's cage. The lion, of course, is furious. But the crowd loves it. This continues for a while. The mime keeps taunting the lion, the crowd keeps growing, and the zookeeper keeps giving him raises. Then, one day, the mime loses his grip and falls into the lion's cage. Terrified, he starts running in circles, with the lion right behind him. Finally, the mime screams, "Help! Help me!" The lion, now fed up, pounces on the mime, pinning him to the ground. As the mime looks up, the lion whispers, "Shut up, you idiot! You want to get us both fired." Jim, in need of a job, isn't afraid to stretch the truth about his qualifications. He figures that once he gets the job, he can impress the boss enough that any fibs will be forgotten. After a successful first interview with the Encyclopedia of American History, he's called back to meet with the sales manager. "You say you have experience selling books?" the sales manager asks. "Lots of it," replies Jim confidently. "And you have a master's in American history from the University of Michigan?" "Correct," Jim answers. "History is my field of study." "Well then," says the sales manager, "as soon as I can finish this form, we can get you started at the firm." While the manager fills out the paperwork, Jim, clearly pleased with himself, begins to whistle. As he looks around the room, he notices portraits of Washington and Lincoln on the walls. Pointing to the pictures, Jim says, "Fine-looking men. Your partners." Many years ago, a wealthy woman with a passion for collecting antiques and curiosities found a beautiful vase during her travels. She admired it so much that she decided to paint her entire display room the same color as the vase. She issued an announcement offering a large sum of money to anyone who could match the vase's color perfectly. Many painters came to inspect the vase, but despite their efforts, none could create a paint color that satisfied the woman. One day, a painter arrived, promising he could match the color. After a brief look at the vase, he immediately produced a perfect match, leaving the woman pleased, and he was awarded the job. This accomplishment made the painter famous, and he went on to build a successful business. Years later, as he prepared for retirement, he decided to pass the business on to his son. The son, eager to learn, asked, "Dad, I have just one question for you. How did you manage to match the color of the vase so perfectly?" The father looked at him and asked, "Can you keep a secret?" "Of course," the son replied. The father leaned in close and whispered, "I painted the vase." One day, 3 unemployed factory workers heard that a large food company was expanding and needed more staff. Eager to find work, they went downtown to apply for jobs. After filling out their applications, each one was interviewed, and, to their delight, each was hired. As they waited to be assigned their duties, a foreman approached the hiring boss and expressed some concerns. "I don't think it's such a good idea," the foreman said. "One of the workers snapped for no apparent reason at his last job, and another cracked up under severe mental stress. The third one, well, I think he might be their father. He's a bit odd, but I can't quite put my finger on it." The hiring boss reassured the foreman, saying, "Don't worry, we'll start them off with something simple. After a week, we'll reassess them to see if they're worth keeping." The foreman reluctantly agreed, but still wasn't sure what to do with them. "Where should we start them?" he asked. The boss smiled and said, "Why not put them in our cereal division? Snap, Crackle, and Pop should work out just fine down there." A man from Peru decided to visit America, but he didn't speak any English. Upon arriving, one of the first things he did was walk into a department store. He made his way to the menswear department, where a young lady approached him and asked if he needed help. "Quiero calcetines," dijo el hombre. "I want socks." The salesgirl, a bit confused, replied, "I don't speak Spanish, but we have some very nice suits over here." No quiero trajes. Quiero calcetines," said the man, repeating himself. "No, I don't want suits, I want socks." The salesgirl, still not understanding, said, "Well, these shirts are on sale this week." No quiero camisas, quiero calcetines." The man insisted again. "No, I don't want shirts, I want socks." She was getting more frustrated. "I still don't know what you're trying to say. We have some fine pants on this rack." No, quiero pantalones. Quiero calcetín," he repeated. "No, I don't want pants. I want socks." As they passed the underwear counter, the man finally spotted a display of socks, grabbed a pair, and happily held them up. "Eso sí que es. Now that's it." The salesgirl, exasperated, shouted, "Then why didn't you just spell it in the first place?" A worried wife took her husband to the doctor and said, "Doctor, my husband can only perform once. Just once." The doctor examined the husband carefully, then suddenly burst out laughing. The wife, puzzled and a little annoyed, asked, "Why are you laughing, doctor?" "This is serious." The doctor replied, "Oh, I'm sorry, ma'am. He may only perform once with you. But with your neighbor, he goes 3 rounds, stopping only to drink water in between." A timekeeper at a factory is responsible for blowing the whistle for the lunch break at noon. Every day, she looks at her watch and blows the whistle right when it strikes 12 p.m. One day, she accidentally bumps her watch and worries that it might be off. Concerned about doing her job correctly, she decides to take her watch to a professional clockmaker. She visits the clockmaker's shop and explains her job, mentioning how important it is for her watch to be accurate. The clockmaker assures her that she doesn't need to worry because he sets his watches by the clocks in the back of his shop. He confidently tells her, "I know they're correct because I set them every Sunday when the church bells ring at 6 a.m. Relieved, the woman leaves the shop. But as she walks away, she starts thinking, how does the church know exactly when it's 6 a.m.? Curious, she goes to the church and asks the bell ringer how he knows when to ring the bells and how he ensures his watch is correct. The bell ringer smiles and says, "I ring the bells right when my watch strikes 6 a.m. I'm sure my watch is accurate. I check it every day at noon when the factory goes on break." Employee: "Excuse me, sir, may I talk to you?" Boss: "Sure, come on in. What can I do for you?" Employee: "Well, sir, as you know, I've been an employee of this prestigious firm for over 10 years. Boss: "Yes." Employee: "I won't beat around the bush. Sir, I would like a raise. I currently have 4 companies after me, and I decided to talk to you first." Boss: "A raise. I would love to give you a raise, but this is just not the right time." Employee: "I understand your position, and I know that the current economic downturn has had a negative impact on sales. But you must also take into consideration my hard work, proactiveness, and loyalty to this company for over a decade." Boss: "Taking all of that into account and considering I don't want to start a brain drain, I'm willing to offer you a 10% raise and an extra 5 days of vacation time. How does that sound?" Employee: "Great! It's a deal. Thank you, sir." Boss: "Before you go, just out of curiosity, what companies were after you?" Employee: "Oh, the electric company, the gas company, the water company, and the mortgage company." Joe grew up in Jamaica, then moved away to attend college and law school. He decided to return to Jamaica because he wanted to be a big shot at home. He hoped to impress everyone, so he opened a new law office in New Kingston. On the first day, Joe saw a man approaching the office. Wanting to make a grand impression on this potential client, he picked up the phone as the man came to the door. He began talking in a loud, authoritative tone. Number: absolutely not. You tell those clowns in New York that I won't settle this case for less than $1 million. Yes, the appeals court has agreed to hear that case next week. I'll be handling the primary argument, and the other members of my team will provide support. Okay, tell the DA that I'll meet with him next week to discuss the details." The conversation continued for almost 5 minutes, with Joe rattling off instructions while the man sat patiently waiting. Finally, Joe put down the phone, turned to the man, and said, "I apologize for the delay, but as you can see, I'm very busy. What can I do for you?" The man calmly replied, "I'm from Cable and Wireless, the telephone company. I came to hook up your phone." A farmer ordered a high-tech milking machine. Since the equipment arrived when his wife was out of town, he decided to test it on himself first. So, he inserted his manhood into the equipment, turned on the switch, and everything else was automatic. Soon he found that the equipment provided him with much more pleasure than his wife did. When the fun was over, though, he quickly realized that he couldn't remove the instrument from his member. He read the manual, but didn't find any useful information on how to disengage himself. He tried every button on the instrument, but still without success. Finally, he decided to call the supplier's customer service hotline with his cell phone. Thank God for cell phones. "Hello, I just bought a milking machine from your company. It works fantastically, but how do I remove it from the cow's udder?" "Don't worry," replied the customer service rep. "The machine will release automatically once it's collected 2 gallons. Have a nice day." On a warm evening, a man strolls into a bar and orders his favorite premium beer. The cheerful bartender smiles and says, "That'll be 1 cent, sir." "1 penny?" the man exclaims, surprised. "Yep, just 1 cent," replies the bartender, handing him a cold, refreshing beer. The man takes a satisfying sip and notices the menu. "Could I also have a nice, juicy T-bone steak with fries, peas, and a salad?" he asks. "Of course," the bartender responds, "but that'll cost you a bit more." "How much?" the man asks. "4 cents," the bartender replies. "4 cents?" the man says, astonished. "Where's the owner of this place?" The bartender points upstairs and says, "He's up there with my wife." The man raises an eyebrow and asks, "What's he doing with your wife?" The bartender grins and replies, "Same thing I'm doing to his business." A businessman visiting a seaside village complimented a local fisherman on the quality of his catch and asked, "How long does it take you to catch all this fish?" "Not very long," replied the fisherman. "Then why don't you stay out longer and catch more?" asked the businessman. The fisherman smiled. "I catch enough for me and my family. After that, I sleep in, fish a bit, play with my kids, take a siesta with my wife, and in the evening, I visit friends, play guitar, and sing. It's a full life." The businessman, eager to help, said, "I have an MBA from Harvard, and I can show you how to grow your business. Start by fishing longer, sell the extra fish, buy a bigger boat, then another, and eventually a fleet. With all the extra revenue, you can set up your own processing plant and even move to the city, Los Angeles, maybe New York. You can direct a huge empire." "How long will all that take?" asked the fisherman. 20, maybe 25 years, said the businessman. "And then what?" "Well, once your business is huge, you can sell stocks, make millions." "Millions?" "Really? And after that?" asked the fisherman. The businessman grinned. "Then you can retire, live in a little village by the coast, sleep late, fish a little, play with your kids, take a siesta with your wife, and enjoy your evenings with friends." After a thorough investigation, a wealthy gangster discovers that his bookkeeper has embezzled $10 million. The bookkeeper is deaf, which was why he was hired in the first place. His silence meant he couldn't testify in court. The mob boss, furious, brings his lawyer, who knows sign language, to confront the bookkeeper. He tells the lawyer, "Ask him where the $10 million is." The lawyer signs to the bookkeeper, "Where is the money?" The bookkeeper signs back, "I don't know what you're talking about." The lawyer turns to the gangster and says, "He says he doesn't know what you mean." The gangster pulls out a pistol, places it to the bookkeeper's head, and snarls, "Ask him again." The lawyer signs, "He'll kill you if you don't tell him." The bookkeeper quickly signs back, "Okay, okay." "The money's in a brown briefcase, buried behind the shed in my cousin Enzo's backyard in Queens." The gangster turns to the lawyer, eagerly asking, "Well, what did he say?" The lawyer smirks and signs, "He says you don't have the guts to pull the trigger." A man is flying in a hot air balloon when he suddenly realizes he's lost. He lowers the balloon and spots a man standing in a field below. He shouts down, "Excuse me, can you tell me where I am?" The man below looks up and says, "Yes, you're in a hot air balloon about 30 feet above this field." The balloonist nods and says, "You must work in IT." The man is surprised and asks, "How did you know?" "Well," says the balloonist, "everything you've said is technically correct, but it's of no help to anyone." The man below grins and says, "You must work in management." The balloonist replies, "I do. But how did you figure that out?" "Simple," says the man. "You don't know where you are or where you're going, but you expect me to help. You're exactly where you were before we met, and now somehow it's my fault." Bill had worked at a pickle factory for many years, but one day he came home and told his wife he had developed a troubling compulsion. He confessed that he felt an overwhelming urge to stick his private part into the pickle slicer. His wife, concerned, suggested he see a therapist, but Bill was too embarrassed. Determined to handle it himself, he promised he would try to overcome it. Weeks went by, but one day Bill returned home looking pale and shaken. His wife immediately asked, "Bill, what's wrong?" "Remember how I told you about that urge I had?" he said. His wife's face went pale. "Oh, no, Bill, you didn't." Bill sighed. "Yes, I did," his wife gasped. "What happened?" Bill shook his head. "I got fired." His wife, still in shock, asked, "No, Bill. I mean, what happened to the pickle slicer?" Bill paused and replied, "Oh, she got fired, too."